this presentation is really about my learning experience. I spend a lot of time doing things that aren't my job, outside of work. So I'm always trying to learn something new. Let's see here. You guys can all see my screen, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep, I got you.
Okay, awesome. All right. So a little about me. I am a husband, and I have 2 kids. One is 2 and the other's 10, so we spread them out a little bit. I spent time in the U.S. Navy as an electronics technician. I got out in 2013, and I currently work as a .NET software developer for a CNC manufacturer. I don't have a whole lot of experience on the website of .NET. It's all desktop apps, Windows services, that type of stuff. We do have a web app that I work on sometimes, but with Node.js, and we're using Google Cloud and Firebase and all that stuff. And I'm currently working towards my OSCP. I just got my incident handling cert from SANS, so that was really cool. So I'm just trying to further my knowledge. And this talk, you'll see, it goes over a couple different domains as far as reverse engineering and even looking a little bit into tracking down where an email's from and what it's doing. So
hey, real quick, you mind if I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Talk about how you got that OSCP voucher. I think that's pretty awesome.
Okay, I am part of VetSec. Everybody here familiar with that? So they had a little CTF that you had to go through, and essentially what you had to do is they gave you an address, a web address. You had to go to it, download a file, and then you had to extract the contents. And they had a text file hidden in an image file, so you had to extract that out, and then you had to decode the text file, which was just base64 encoded, and then it gave you a web address that you had to go to download a VM. Once you got the VM, you had to break into it, and then after you broke into it, you had to find the text file with the URL to actually apply for the OSCP voucher. And then so there was a bunch of us that successfully did that, and I got chosen for the OSCP voucher. So I'm trying to work towards that now.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because I thought that was awesome, and it's not like you just went into it. You earned that. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a whole lot of fun. It was an experience. But so what does this talk cover? So we start out with a suspicious email. At that point, it goes into investigating the email, because it actually tricked me. Okay, so not proud to admit that, but it did. And then finding out that there was a malicious payload in the link, and downloading it, and then I wanted to find out what it did. I had to poke it with a stick. So I recreated the payload in .NET, C#.NET, so that I could control every aspect of it. And then I went and verified my findings with AnyRun. So this is going over the whole process and how I learned, because before this I didn't have any experience in the majority of this. I had never seen a VBA macro. So I hope everybody gets something out of it. If nothing else, at least a way to learn things. Anybody who has questions during this, I really want you guys to speak up and ask questions because there is some technical stuff in here. So if you don't understand it, definitely just speak up and let me know so I can explain it a little bit better. I don't want anybody to be left behind. So here's the email. We have a house in Virginia, and we have a property management company. We were actually expecting a repair quote. So when my wife got this, she actually said, "Hey, this looks suspicious to me. Check it out." And I did, and it did look suspicious, but I actually went in and looked at the headers, and it looked legit to me. So you'll see the headers here in a minute, but as you can see, it's from this strange Appfolio address. Appfolio is actually the application that the property management company uses. This link actually goes to here. So, again, it was hosted, says sg.appfolio. So I was like, that's strange. Let me look at this header. This is a known good header from an email that they had sent. And you notice it passes the DKIM and the SPF and DMARC checks. And then the thing I really want you to look at is this bottom section here with the green highlight. And you'll see that localhost.local domain, right, with the IP address, and it was sent from from here, and then it went to the appfolio.net, right? And then you'll notice the next line up, again, appfolio.net and ESMTP. So I compared this with another header, the header from that email that looked suspicious. And again, it passes all the DKIM, the SPF, and DMARC checks. And you'll notice here it says SendGrid.net. Now, in my research, I was looking up, what is SendGrid, and it appears to be, at least from what I could find, is a web, like a web email. So I'm looking this up, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and in my limited understanding of what's going on here, it looks to me like this previous email was sent from an application hosted in their internal network, some sort of Appfolio desktop application, whereas this looks like it was sent from a web-based login of Appfolio. So that's why I guess it didn't. That's I guess why it tricked me essentially, is because I figured maybe they had just logged in, through a web interface and sent this out. So I did. I clicked on. I downloaded the file, and luckily Chrome stopped me. It's like, no, what are you doing? This is malicious. So I needed to know what was going on, what this thing was doing, what was it meant to do. So I opened up my VM. At the time I was primarily on Linux, so I opened it in my Windows VM. I made sure that I wasn't connected to the internet, and that it wasn't, there were no shared folders between us. So I went and I downloaded the file. After doing a little bit of research, it was a doc file. So after doing a little bit of research, I realized that I could unzip the file. I could just rename it to .zip, and then I could extract the contents of the doc file, which was awesome. So I started going through it, and I saw some stuff in there, and it's like, looked like it was for VBA macros. So from that point, I actually opened it in LibreOffice, and LibreOffice has the macros automatically disabled. So this is what I saw. right here. So from that point, I was like, well, let me go take a look at the macros and see what's going on here. I had not had any experience with VBA macros or anything like that, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. But I wasn't expecting this. So you can see, can everybody see that? Is that too small?
I can see it.
Yeah, it looks pretty good on my screen.
Okay, all right, cool. So on the left-hand side, we can see that we have forms and the top arrow, and that's pointing to the actual script that we're seeing here on the right-hand side. And then if you look a little bit below that, the second arrow, SE25, and that is actually the visual part, the form that you can move things around on and all that. So I want to pull up real quick if I can. All right. So this is actually the file. I still had it. So go to macros and we'll edit the macros. And there we go. This is what I saw when I opened up the visual part. Not very helpful. I actually spread out everything because you see how it was all crunched up before. I had to pull everything apart, and each of these was named like with really strange, you know, letters and numbers and stuff. So I just went through and explored this a little bit just to see what was going on, and you'll see. Let me pull that back up here. If I click on one of these, you'll see, you know, there's different attributes, label. Scroll down. Let's see if I can find one. Some of them have some text and stuff in there, and I can't find it now, but we'll see in a little bit. I didn't know anything about these VBA macros, so my first inclination was to go to Google and start searching. And I did. I came across a website that mentioned different obfuscation techniques that were used, and you know, kind of how to go about de-obfuscating it, I guess. And there was another important piece of information on that website, which was it was talking about VBA specifically and uninitialized variables, which will come in handy when de-obfuscating this. There's also a technique called where they use what are called NOPs, or like no operation, essentially. And what those are is basically useless pieces of information in the useless pieces of code. Yeah, so the NOPs are just operations that don't really affect anything in the script. They're just there to confuse you, to make it harder to find out what the script is doing. So the first thing I really needed to do was find these and remove them. That way I could shorten the script and I could try to make more sense of it. So the first thing I noticed in the script when looking at it was these debug.print statements. So these don't do anything except for print stuff out to the console, right? So and you can see they repeat themselves. So the first thing I did was remove these because they just didn't serve a purpose in the script. They didn't affect anything. From that point, I moved on to renaming the variables. So what I did is I opened up the script in Notepad++, and this is the original script here. What I did is I went and I renamed all these variables. So I would come in and highlight a variable, and you'll see it'll highlight everything else. And then I can rename this to var1, and I can replace them all. And now you see it renamed it to var1. And all I did was go line by line, right? And just keep doing that with these variables. Anything that I saw, right, that went across multiple functions, because you can see there are actually multiple functions in here, I would name var1, var2, var3, and just keep going like that. Anything that I highlighted, for instance, this, right? It has one other instance in this whole thing. I would name lvar for local variable. That way I keep track of what was local, what was, not. And this is what I ended up with. Let's see here. Right here. So this is sort of not really, it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The script is still pretty long. Even though I removed debug statements and I renamed the variables, there's still a lot in here that was really, they're useless. So I had to do another round. I had to iterate again. I had to take another round of removing more knobs. So I highlighted the knobs here, right? And as you can see, this is just a loop. And that loop reoccurs throughout this script, but it does nothing. You're essentially just assigning variables to one another and just to make it harder to read. After I did that, you'll see the result here on the right hand side. So this script is significantly cut down. Let's see here. So I've separated out each of the functions. I have renamed all the variables. And now I can sort of make sense of what this script is doing. So I can run through and I can see that it's getting the help context ID from the visual part of that script, the attributes that I mentioned earlier, right? And it's storing it, 50 plus 50 plus whatever's in here, storing it in here, and then it's getting a character, the ASCII character based off the number, and it's going through and doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not gonna sit here and explain everything that it's doing, but I didn't want to really run this by itself, and to really understand what it was doing. I took the time to go through and actually recreate this in C#. I could have done Python or whatever, but I am not as familiar with Python as I am with .NET. So for me, I just went and did that console application. Now, I actually put it up on my GitHub for anybody who's actually interested, and I can send out the link after if anybody really wants to know. And I actually commented on what every line was doing, so you can get a good understanding. And some of the stuff in VBA wasn't directly, couldn't translate directly over to C#, because of the way that they start new processes in C#, and versus VBA. So I had to do a little improvising, similar to how you would do if you were translating a real language, right? They don't always translate directly from one to the other. The script, what it actually does is it takes this long string here, it splits this string based off, let's see if I can get it here. So this string right here, you see has reoccurring sequences in it, right? And these are important. In between these reoccurring sequences, you'll see letters and numbers and stuff like that. So what it does is it takes this string and it splits it apart. And when it does that, it creates an array of all the characters that aren't in the repeating sequence. From there, it starts a new process. It starts PowerShell is what it does. And the result of that string, that long repeating string, is this PowerShell script right here. This is what it results in. Let's see here. And I actually skipped a bunch of stuff. Okay. So what does that PowerShell do? We'll see here in a minute because I had to go through and find out what that did also. It connects to a URL, it downloads an exe, and then it runs that exe. Let's see here. So here it is again, and you can see it's PowerShell-E, and then it's just a base 64 encoded string. I went and I decoded that string, and I came up with this. Now this still isn't terribly intuitive. It's not very user-friendly, and they actually use techniques to obfuscate this as well. So I went and I broke up each of the lines just to see, just to get a better idea of what was going on. And as you can see, it's still not perfect. There's still a lot of things where they've broken up different commands into, multiple strings just to make it, again, harder to read. So I went through and I actually cleaned this up a bit. And here's the cleaned up version, right? So it creates a new temp directory called Office 2019. It sets the security protocol. It then gives your app, it creates a name for the file that it's going to download. From that point, it gives the full path to the directory that we're going to download it to, which is this Office 2019 directory. We create a new web client, which is going to be used to download the application. And it has this list of URLs. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 URLs. What it does is it goes through each URL and it tries to connect and download the file. If it successfully connects and downloads the file, it checks to make sure it's the right size, and then it'll actually start that application from there. So it's all it is just downloading an application and running it. So I wanted to find out what this did without actually downloading the file. So I went through and I ran it through AnyRun. And if you haven't heard of AnyRun, it's an excellent website. So you just create your account and it was free. And you feed it the doc file and it'll execute it for you. It'll run it and it'll tell you exactly what it's doing. And as you can see, let's see here. I have it open right here. So as you can see, it's calling PowerShell, and it gives you where it's connecting to right here. And then it says that it downloaded this INUED file right here, which created this other file, wusa.exe. And there's a whole bunch of different stuff you can go into in here. It's really awesome. If you haven't ever checked it out, I highly suggest it. It's a great resource. And it tells you this wusa.exe down here connects to a command and control server. So, and it gives you the IP address of the server and everything. It's really cool. So let's see here. So that's just verifying kind of what I discovered when I manually reversed this thing, right? It's going through and showing you that all it's doing is calling PowerShell, and then from there it's taking it. Let's see here. So if you look, and I want to show at the app name line here, you can see the INUED9Q, right? Now that is the name that it was going to download. If you look right here, you can see what file it downloaded, INUED9Q.exe. So again, when I started this, I had no idea what any of this stuff was. I had never seen it, but I was interested in it, and it was a really fun experience. It's a puzzle, is what it is. Let's see here. So, are there any questions, comments?
Yeah, I was actually wanting to ask, whenever you have those VBA scripts that are really obfuscated, do you happen to know if there are any resources online that can obfuscate that code for you? Like in some languages there are to where it's like completely automated, but I guess judging by the code, it looks too well choreographed just to be ran through a script to mess up the code, if you will.
So I actually haven't done any research as to whether there are automated means to de-obfuscating this thing, but I guess I just kind of assumed that there were, but I really wanted to stay away from those, right? Because the
Okay.
goal of doing this was really my own curiosity and learning. I wanted to learn how they did this, and how to, how to make sense of it without relying on any sort of automated means. But yeah, let me actually look that up, and I'll actually get back with you on if I can find something that will do this automatically, especially with this script specifically.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
and
awesome. Thank you.
and to kind of add to that, Gray, from my experience, there are definitely ways to automate the obfuscation process, particularly when it comes to like PowerShell commands. I know there's automated ways to do it, as well as VBA macros and things like that. But what you'll see is a lot of times with these malware campaigns, if they're not just, garbage mass emailed ones, they're going to use custom methods where there's not really going to be a way to automate that de-obfuscation in an effective manner. So like Notepad++, like Matt did, and manually reverse engineering that is going to get you more than running it through any kind of automated de-obfuscation.
Interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for jumping in there, because
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no worries. It's funny because I actually I ran into a VBA script like this that I had to reverse engineer about 5 years ago doing an incident response for an organization, and very, very similar process and attributes to what you were looking at here. So it's really interesting to see you go through that same process for something you received personally. Can attest to manually reverse engineering all of that VBA script and getting down to the PowerShell script is time consuming. It's like a labor of love because it's interesting. It's like you're putting a puzzle together the whole time. But it's really funny. And there's a lot of different obfuscation techniques. Like in this one, you saw what Matt pointed out with the print screen commands that were going on, whatever it's called in VBA, but you know what I mean, print code to screen. And when I had done it previously, there were a bunch of comments in print commands that were Offspring lyrics to a particular Offspring song. And it was funny because the other incident responder I was working with didn't recognize the lyrics, and I immediately knew that those were just garbage that they threw in there because I recognized the song lyrics. So funny stuff like that they'll try and do to throw you off.
Yep. You're right, though. It's a puzzle. It's and it's fun, right? It's something that that I wanted to do because it brought me joy. So yeah.
Guarantee your ability as a software developer though definitely played there, because it's tough to understand those calls and recreate like I'm thinking about things like integer to character translations and things like that if you don't understand those kind of concepts.
Yeah. The one that threw me off was the creating a new process, because in VBA, what it does, and you probably know this better than I do, is they actually have a string that they use to and I forget what the string is now exactly. But yeah, they use a string, and then they call this create function, and it's a little strange for me. It took me time to actually work it out, and then to I create processes in C# all the time, so I know how to do that. But the way that they set the different variables, show window, stuff like that, in VBA is way different. So you have to be familiar with, another method of doing that in whatever language you choose.
Yeah, and nobody knows VBA because it's a garbage language. So you have to go look up all those process calls and the function names and what they take in as parameters and all that.
Yeah, if you look, and I didn't really go over it in the presentation, but if you look, there are a bunch of things like this, right? LVAR 6, right, equals this nonsense, right? Plus these other variables that you've already got, and the control tip text from the visual part. Now, if if you go back to the original script and you look for this W1P or WLP, WR, whatever, you're not going to find it anywhere but this one spot. And so you're like, well, it's never initialized. There's nothing ever stored in it. It's a null value. Yep. But in VBA, a null value is just whatever type of variable, the default value for whatever type of variable. So an integer is going to be 0, a string is going to be just an empty string.
Yep.
And I had no idea when I first started this, so that kind of, again, it played back into the having to actually learn about VBA, and how they do things. So
yeah, and all that garbage distilling down to 6 different web addresses that you can then go research. And so, like, for example, for people that are thinking about this, considering next steps and stuff like that, go and looking at their domain reputation, what's hosted at those domains, if there's any owner or tied back to any organization. Ultimately they're probably either compromised or anonymized, but gives you a kind of a path forward from that. And then looking at everything coming down to, again, that PowerShell command and that process starting. When you're going through this process, ultimately you're going to end up with some kind of event like that. So you have to keep looking until you can piece that together. Nobody's going to obfuscate and go to this level unless you're starting a process or downloading something or running some kind of command like that.
Yep. Maybe if you don't mind, I'd like to talk with you a little bit more. Maybe you know more about the email header situation than I do. But I'm really interested to find out, the whole SendGrid thing, and because my understanding of it is that, or at least what it looked like for me, is that the known good one was sent from a desktop application inside their domain versus something being sent from a web interface.
So the only thing I'd say there is, I think I don't know that you can make a determination of desktop versus web app from those headers. The way I would describe it is the known good came from a server that they control directly. So like a web server over SMTP outbound that they fully control, whereas the bad one came from an anonymous SendGrid account, or a SendGrid account is all you know about that at that point. And to me, I drew the suspicion from the fact that their known good came from an internal server versus the known bad came from a SendGrid application. But there's not a whole lot you can tell, because a lot of legitimate organizations use SendGrid, especially with mass emailing and with sending out regular communications to clients. So I guess that's really my only takeaway from that area, from what you were talking about.
So I guess the other question is the SPF and DKIM and DMARC checks. Those actually being passed, does that not suggest that it was a legitimate account that maybe got compromised, or Is there other methods of bypassing that? Do you know?
Potentially. So I didn't see the domain that it originated from or the reputation or value of that domain versus the, so I guess the question is, did it come from a legitimate address as far as the true source, or did it come from a outside address that was just made to look like the true source? Or, you know, what were those domains and what were those usernames? I would look there. The DKIM, DMARC, or et cetera, DKIM, DMARC, and SPF will pass if you're using SendGrid if it's a legitimate email address made to look like, you know, their domain.
Okay.
But they probably wouldn't be able to use their actual email address unless an account was compromised. So I'd look at that area.
Okay. Yeah, I actually got all this information together, you know, with the AnyRun and, you know, the email headers, and I actually forwarded that over to the property management company.
Yeah.
But I never heard anything back, so I don't know. The server got taken down, so I don't, you know, the URL and stuff where this stuff was being hosted got taken down. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Businesses.
Yeah,
are
unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't even, they probably wouldn't even known what to do with that when you sent it to them.
Yeah.
What's
Well,
the
they said they didn't. They said they were using a third party IT company, and that they hadn't. They had been on it for like a week and hadn't figured anything out. So I was like, well.
Well,
Yeah. But anybody else have any questions? No. All right. Thank you, guys.